Is DeepSeek V4 Flash actually better than GPT-4o, or is it just Twitter just hyping another cheap model? Short answer, for a lot of real-world workloads, this thing is scarily close to the top models at a tiny fraction of the price. Today, I'm going to break down what DeepSeek V4 Flash really is, how it stacks up against GPT-4o and Claude, and show you actual use cases people are building with it from X and not just benchmarks on a slide. So welcome back to PromptMatrix. Let's get into it. So what is DeepSeek V4 Flash in plain language? DeepSeek V4 Flash is the fast and cheap sibling in DeepSeek's new V4 family, a mixture of experts language model with around 284 billion total parameters, but only about 13 billion are active for each token it processes. That MOE design plus a hybrid attention architecture lets it handle up to 1 million tokens of context. So you can drop in huge code bases or giant PDFs while staying fast enough to actually feel usable. It first launched as a preview around April 23, 2026, alongside the heavier V4 Pro model. Then on July 21st, DeepSeek pushed an official 0731 release of V4 Flash. So same architecture, but better post-training, agent behavior, and coding performance. And it's now being served as a default via their API. On pricing, the official docs and model guides put V4 Flash at around $0.14 per million input tokens and $0.28 per million output tokens via DeepSeek's own API, with some API platforms and analysis quoting roughly 0.18 and 0.25 out depending on provider. Compare that to something like GPT-4o at around 2.50 in and $10 out per million tokens, and Claude Sonnet 3.5 or 4 at roughly 3 in and 15 out. And you're talking about a difference of an order of a magnitude or more in cost. DeepSeek also released open weights for V4 Flash under a permissive license, meaning you can not only call the hosted API, but also download the model, about 160, 170 gigabyte in mixed precision, and run or fine-tune it yourself if you have the hardware or a cloud setup. So in simple terms, V4 Flash is an ultra-cheap, ultra-long context, near frontier level text model that you can either rent through an API or self-host. Guys, enough with the technical details. Let me guide you and show you what people actually build on and to see some real-world examples with how much they cost. This post comment code, they run a test between DeepSeek V4 Flash, Kimi K3, and GLM 5.2, and they replicated the Flappy Bird and built it again with the DeepSeek V4 Flash, Kimi K3, and GLM 5.2, and the results are looking pretty close. However, the cost, there's a huge difference. DeepSeek V4 Flash model costs them 150 times less than compared to Kimi K3 model. Imagine that. Even we talked about how powerful Kimi K3 is and how well it was performing against Claude and Sonnet 5 models last week, and today we are getting a similar result with Kimi K3 but costing 50 times less. This is astonishing in this example. On the next example, user built an first-person shooting game and it took him 32 minutes to build and only less than 1 cent. That you can run this whole model, maybe it will cost you $2 if you run it the whole day. And if you take a look at the game, I mean, I had to say it's not that smooth. It's a bit, let's say, not that smooth. And also the shadowing, as you can see here, a bit, there's no object in here, but there's a shadow. It's a bit off. And the objects are looking like they are not totally rendered. However, or not sure if it's a one-shot result, but building it for less than 1 cent is still pretty optimistic. And you can see he just shot an item and it just fall down. There's also some physics involved. It's pretty interesting. On the next one, the same user, but another example. Again, the time spent was less than 1.5 hours. The cost was 33 cents. He did the same example by using Opus 5 and it cost him 100 times more, and also the file it got, the whole project size was 10 times larger. So we all know that the Claude models generate some more codes than it's necessary. So in this case, the size of the project was 10 times larger. And if you take a look at what he built for 33 cents with DeepSeek V4 Flash, it's looking, I don't know the details of the game, but at least compared to the last one, the shadows are looking the point. And there's a place called Pokemon. I'm not sure what he prompted, but there's no door, but he can enter. Definitely he needs to work on it. There's some storyline. There are some interactions. 3 Pokemons. What are these? Bulbasaur. Okay. Yeah. It looks definitely it's not like production ready. However, for a first trial, looking pretty optimistic. The next example is a user built a 3D glob dashboard from a reference image. Can upload image files, but DeepSeek can't read or visualize the images. It is more like converting it to text to process it. Okay, so he used Kimi K3 to read that reference image, and then used a DeepSeek V4 Flash model to build the globe dashboard. And here we can see the result. And by the way, it was 8 and 9 times cheaper than Opus 4.8. And when we take a look at the result, this time it's pretty smooth compared to the other games that we saw, because it was fluttering, but now it's a smooth experience. However, I kind of realized that the colors could have been a bit more realistic, because this dark bluish color does not really represent the actual real 3D global dashboard, I had to say. But yeah, better than, let's say, the cost perspective, a lot less than Opus. The next example, another one-shot prompted game. This time it was DeepSeek V4 going up against Opus. And yeah, he mentioned there was only 7 days of a difference, but DeepSeek V4 Flash did it in 100 lines, and Opus completed the project with 3,000 lines. And DeepSeek cost 1 cent. Wow. But he didn't mention how much the Opus 5 costed him. So he mentioned it's $1. It's crazy. 100 times more the cost. We realized a similar experience like in the other one-shot prompted games that I showed you before. The FPS is somewhere between 10 and 15 based on result from DeepSeek. Opus 5 is looking pretty neat. Just take that and deploy it. It's deployment ready. However, if you scale it up for an industrialization level project, I'm not sure how much it's going to then cost. The cost of it is going to skyrocket, definitely. But whereas for the DeepSeek, maybe with a continuous iteration, you can improve the FPS, you can improve the lags, you can debug and get a smoother gameplay experience. So you can improve it, but it will cost you less, and eventually it will converge into having a similar result like an Opus. Therefore, based on what I see, depending on your purpose, DeepSeek V4 Flash is looking pretty optimistic. Here's another example, but this time DeepSeek V4 Flash again against Gemini 3.6, and the result of it was Gemini has performed better, and it built the 3.js model in 2 minutes, whereas for DeepSeek V4 Flash was a bit time consuming. It was 50 minutes. It's not all positive. You also had to see and compare it against other models such as Gemini 3.6. In this case, Gemini 3.6 Flash performed better. However, there is no reference or information about how much the Gemini 3.6 Flash model cost him. I assume it's also quite less compared to Opus. All right, let's see another example. Yeah, this one is also crazy, guys. Take a look at the simulator that he built. In this case, the comparison is a bit more extended. Not only DeepSeek V4 Flash against Opus, but also GPT 5.6 Sol model, which came out approximately 2 weeks ago. And on the bottom left, have the Kimi K3 model. There is no argument. Opus produces the best result, no matter what. If we take cost out of the equation, Opus 5 is the best performer currently in the world. However, in the real world examples, if you're trying to build software, you need to consider the cost of your project. It's a really important, part of your project. And based on what I see, is my own conclusion is that if I were to start a new project from scratch, I would probably go for the Chinese models and use Kimi K3 as the orchestrator and DeepSeek V4 Flash as one of my agents to either Flash or Prompt model to build my complete project or let it build instead of going for the American-based closed models because they're extremely costly. Of course, the output is going to be probably better, but considering the cost perspective, and you can also run the DeepSeek and Kimi K3 for a longer time, and then it will converge again to a better result. Maybe it will probably approach to a similar result. Maybe it will take you more, but considering all of these arguments, I believe I would go for currently, if I were to build a complete project, I would use these stack. And I showed you last week build an Android app by using Kimi K3 and DeepSeek V4 Pro model, not the Flash model, because it wasn't available last week. And I highly encourage you to take a look at that. I would say that's it for today, guys. You have seen technical what DeepSeek V4 does. At the same time, some real world examples and eventually my own conclusion about where I currently stand, taking a look at the overall models available. Highly appreciate if you subscribe and give a thumbs up to the channel. I would say that's it for today and see you next time. Bye for now.